we can look at our own families and say, yeah, we're holy, right? Right on. Good deal. So the question might be, just in case you can't say that with full confidence, just in case, the question might be, how do you get, what does it take to make a family holy? Well, I got a kind of an answer to that. It's going to be, you can answer it a lot more ways than what I'm going to say, but the first thing I have to say is, in order to have a holy family, you need imperfect people. You know why we need imperfect people? That's the only kind there is. That's the only kind. You got to start with what we got. There's an old comic strip, Peanuts, which came out around the beginning of the new year, and Charlie looked at Lucy, Charlie Brown looked at Lucy and said, Lucy, do you have any New Year's resolutions? And Lucy said, knocking him over, what? What for? What do I need to change about my life? I'm good. I like myself the way I am. There's nothing that I need to do differently. Now, I don't know if you've seen a person like that, lived with one, or seen one in the mirror. But we're all imperfect, called to be on the road to holiness. And the road to holiness is what brings us to holiness. We experience it along the way. Not fully, but we're getting there. Otherwise, why do you think St. Paul, in the letter to the Colossians, in the second reading today, wrote about this kind of stuff? He says, put on. That means, it must have slipped off. Put on heartfelt compassion. So it might mean that there was some judging going on. And let that go. Put on heartfelt compassion. Kindness. Maybe some people were being mean to one another. Put on patience. Now, why would you have to do that? Except we all get impatient. Gentleness, because sometimes we can be harsh to one another, can't we? Humility. How does this work for you? I'm better than you are. I'm right, and I'm right all the time, and you don't count. How does that work for you? Not well. Put on humility. Much better than boasting and pride. Bearing with one another, because there are just certain aspects of a person's personality that they're just there. No matter how much we criticize them and get on them for it, it's just part of who they are. Let's say somebody's obsessively compulsive about neatness or about cleanliness. And no matter how many times you say, just let it go, it doesn't matter. It doesn't make any difference. They're got to have it. Bear with one another. Sometimes it seems people can be compulsively messy. Bear with one another. Bear with those Packer fans. You got to bear with them. Because they're not going to change. I tried. We have to bear with one another. Sometimes we just have to say, okay. And you know why we need to do this? Because they need to do that with us. Don't they? And sometimes it leads into the next thing about and forgive one another. And then later it says, why? Because Christ has forgiven you. And we pray it all the time in the Our Father. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. We need to forgive because we need to be forgiven as well. And practicing these things, and I take that word seriously, practicing these things is what makes us holy. For example, you can sit in your room and say, I'm the most patient person in the world, till you walk out of your room and meet the person that bugs you most. And then it's like the impatience, okay. So practicing patience makes us patient, makes us holy. And by that I mean loving, more like God who is love. That's the first thing. You take imperfect people who are on the way. Second thing that I'm going to talk about is what was in that first reading from Sirach, where it talks about honoring your father. If you look at that whole passage in the Bible, you find out that it includes more than just honoring your father. It has to do with your mother and the parents' attitudes towards the kids. And one way to honor one another is to honor them with the gift of time. It's one of the most precious things we have. I read a story once about a woman who was a lawyer and lived a good distance from her father. One day her father contacted her and says, honey, I need you to come and visit me. And she said, Dad, I'd love to, but I got to be in court tomorrow. I've got some briefs to write, some research to do. I'm meeting some clients. And he interrupted her and says, I just want to ask you one thing, darling. Are you going to come to my funeral? Will you have time for that? She said, Dad, I can't believe you asked me that. Of course I'd be there at your funeral. And then he said, forget the funeral and come now. I need you more now than I will need you then. And of course she came as soon as she could and did that more often afterwards. To honor one another, we can honor them with our time. And it's not just sitting in the same place, although that's important. It's also paying attention to one another. The other night, I went out to dinner with a couple people, and we were sitting in the waiting area before we were seated, and across the way was a family of 5, a mom and dad, and 3 younger teenagers, or maybe a little younger than that. And as I just kind of looked up and saw them, you know what they were doing? Every single one of them was doing this on their phones. Every one of them. All right, maybe they were texting each other. I don't know. And if they were, I don't know why. But I hope their dinner went better. I'm not judging them. I'm just saying, isn't this kind of a time to talk to each other? This age we live in has the most means ever in history of being in touch with one another, of being connected, and of communicating. You know all the stuff we got, texting and all that stuff. And yet we find an increase in this age of sadness, depression, and disconnection. Why is that? Maybe it's because we don't spend enough quality time with one another talking about things that matter. That makes us holy when we do that. Makes us loving when we do that. And I'll just talk about one other thing among many. And that's with the gospel word. Mary and Joseph brought Jesus to the temple and presented him to God. A good way to have a loving family, a holy family, is to include God in it. To pray for your family. To pray with it if you can manage that. Sometimes that's hard. And to bring the problems you have, the struggles you have, as well as the gratitude you have to God. And at least in my experience, both in family as well as in community life, there are some things you just can't manage by yourself. I tried and tried and tried, and it's like, okay, I got to pray about this. Let God do what God does for somebody else, in the family and for the whole situation. Some things you just got to walk away from. It's like I got to let it alone. It's not going to change. I got to let go of what I think is my right to take some vengeance out on somebody else. I just got to let it go. And we come by that through prayer a lot. And praying with one another. Not a casual, I think I'll include God today. Nah, how about something about God's part of my life and my family. It's not only your, immediate family, but it's the family of a human family we live in. What does it take to be a holy family? It takes imperfect people who are willing to walk on the way of learning how to become better. Learning how to become better at putting on heartfelt compassion and kindness and humility and gentleness, bearing with one another and forgiving one another. If we do those things, what a difference our families would be, and what a difference it would make in our world.